edition of Leaders Insight by myself, Nick Baxter of IsoNation. We're really lucky actually this weekend. We've got a fantastic guest in Richard Mills from Haygrove Growing Systems. Richard, welcome to you. How are you today?
Oh, thanks, Nick. I'm delighted to be here. Really good. I think it's a great initiative, and yeah, glad to play a part.
Oh, that's really good, actually. Thank you very much, and I really appreciate the sentiment. We spoke earlier off camera about some of the great stuff that's come out of this the collective, and what we're trying to do here with IsoNation, just to kind of recap, is build a business collective which kind of creates a great deal of support at a time when there's a great deal of uncertainty. We know what it's like as business leaders. It's kind of a lonely place running your business. A lot of people have got staff furloughed. What we're trying to do here is understand, one, the impact of COVID on everyone's business situation, but more importantly, what have people done to try and limit the impact? What have they done around strategies? Can we share those strategies with other people, regardless of sectors? And I think a lot of what we've got from the previous 9 insights is that it's largely around mindset as well as operational effectiveness and challenge. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. Really honoured to have you here. We'll talk a little bit more about your business. We'll talk a little bit more about what's happened in the last few weeks, which has been, we're not about to say, but I'm going to say it once and once only, in unprecedented times. Unprecedented and furloughed. They're the key words, really, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, aren't they just? I mean, I think extraordinary is a good description of the circumstances, and I think it's the first time for any of us of this generation who have come across a situation that so profoundly affects everyone in one way or other, business, personally, or whatever that might be. And I think that people want to come together professionally, personally. I think we just keep seeing examples of there being a genuine desire to be helpful. And I think if that's a resounding thing that comes out of this, then that's one of the things I would hope would be sustained.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. There's a couple of things that you don't want to be around in the ether for a while, but there are a couple of great things, and that's certainly one of them. But we'll touch on that in a bit. Before we go in, just a bit of Facebook Live admin. If we could all share and like, please. Bethany, welcome. Tobias, welcome. Rachel, welcome. Feel free to throw any questions in for Richard or myself, and we will endeavour to answer all of those. So I always start the interview off with the OMG moment.
Yeah.
The moment where it was quite prevalent that COVID-19 and Corona was certainly here to stay and was going to be a bit of a disruptive force. What was your OMG moment, Richard?
Well, we didn't really have one, or I didn't have one straight away. We've got an office in China and a business that we've been doing there for the last 3 or so years. So I guess probably had as much of a heads up as we would reasonably expect. But I think the second that office, back end of January, what the situation externally was good. We were coming off the back of 2019, coming into the year, dusting everything down, and then a kind of sequence of events really started. And I remember seeing the news. I've just looked it up again today to get my facts right, but I remember being quite shocked in January that more than 100 people had sadly died in China, and that at the time seemed like an extraordinary number. And clearly it was a sign of things to come. I think beyond that, during February, we went to a sales conference in Berlin. And I remember being asked at the entrance pre-warned that we would have to fill in a form to say, we don't think we have symptoms. And we're all thinking this can't, surely it's not going to be this wide ranging. And then sure enough, you roll forward only 5 or 6 weeks. We're having conversations about simulating working from home. Will the IT work? And a real conversation of, is this really real? So if there was an OMG moment, I think it was when one of the first teams, I can't remember, I think it was the finance department, went to work from home. And then within days, the announcement was that the lockdown was here. And here I am, sat in the dining room that I found myself in the next morning. So if there was an OMG moment, it was probably the first time one of my beautiful kids Zoom bombed me. But this is a reality of the situation. So that was probably it. But yeah, professionally, it unfolded reasonably quickly, but we did have a slightly softer entry.
Excellent. And I suppose, and you know what, it's really good because when we first reached out to each other, we had some communication on email. You were telling me about your international operations. probably should have spoke about this before, but beforehand, why don't you tell us a little bit about your business? Because I know there are a number of elements within the group. So just to kind of put some perspective on our chat for the rest of the interview.
Yeah, Haygrove's a family farming business from the beginning, and we have two major divisions. So we've got farming operations in the UK, South Africa, Portugal, and China for supplying mainly major retailers. That's half of the business. The other half of the business, the piece I look after, is then supplying growers, fruit or horticultural industry growers around the world with polytunnels. And that's a global business, 7 or 8 offices around the world. So there's quite a lot of moving parts from a people perspective. But yeah, we're a family business. The founder is still very, very active in the business, very much in the business. And we're built on some family values. So it feels like working in a small local company whilst being part of something a bit bigger.
And you know, that's just from a recruitment perspective and from a employee engagement, because I obviously got an employee engagement business and a recruitment business. That's exactly what we want to hear. We want to hear about, we want organizations, and I'm a massive champion of organizations which are locally formed or locally established, but have a global presence, but still feel like local businesses. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the impact to people and what you've done to mitigate some of that, to make sure that the team are productive and engaged. But what did you do initially? I mean, what were the precautionary steps you took straight away to kind of stem the flow, or what measures did you take?
Well, the first thing I think was to acknowledge that we had a challenge that was going to affect us in many ways, and how could we speed up the communication process internally so that we could, really generate the best outcomes of what at the time looked really quite a challenging set of circumstances for delivering on customer orders or inquiries that we already had on at that point. And I think, like anything, when you go into a crisis, every facet of leadership, it just compresses, the time frame squeezes. So, we're looking less further forward, increasing the span of control that leaders have, and really saying, what's the situation we face? How volatile is that to external changes? And is the action plan we have still appropriate? So by doing all of those things, which we would usually do over a 3 or 6 month kind of horizon, it's just putting deliberate things in place to really squeeze those forward. Increase. How did that really look? We established, I remember, I think you had Henry Simpson, who was on. I was watching this a few weeks ago. Yeah. I'm glad we formed a Cobra committee before. It sounded difficult, but that's exactly what we did. So we have a daily meeting with the key decision makers in the business, the owner, and then we have more frequent, much shorter management meetings where we're getting people together to say, are we dealing with today's problem today? So that was the major reaction, was really a change in immediate communication style and how we could get the very, very fluid scenario interpreted into an actual action plan daily rather than weekly or monthly. But people-wise, positive, very positive, very quickly. I think obviously getting our own people safe, interpreting what was a difficult set of rules to bring in. How were we interpreting them? We wanted to make sure that the safety of staff, customers was the very first thing that came to our head. The second thing is, how do we, like any other business, how do we economically make sure that we're here at the end of it? And what steps do we have to take? Cash very quickly accelerates up that agenda in terms of the discussions we're having. How do we think more about that? And I think leaders at every level in the business, senior, middle, junior, whatever they might be, had to step up pretty quickly and make lots of quick tactical decisions. And I think we, like anything, crisis, you're never going to get everything right. I think we've got some things right and on balance have done okay. But it's been a real test, and it's only, I keep reminding myself of this, it's 7 weeks ago. It didn't feel like this. So it's a short space of time. But yeah, the initial reaction was, it's going to be a challenge. So how do we see the opportunity, not rescind into risk aversion? There's no, this is not a space for that. It's how do we deal with a problem in front of our face today and make sure that we're not blinded to the opportunities that, might jump out in front of us. Where can we help?
It's a great point, and I'll latch on to the not blind by the opportunities that come out, because there's always some opportunities that come out of this. A good friend of mine, who's doing hand sanitizer units, he was doing kiosk units before, was doing hand sanitizer units, literally that guy hasn't had a day off and he's working 14 hours a week. There's been some opportunity there, but there has been equally so. There have been a number of organisations, unfortunately, that haven't even lasted the 7 weeks because their supply chain has been affected in such a way. So tell us a little bit about what the impact's been, because from the outset, you'd think agriculture supplying to the retail supermarket space. You'd like to think that actually you're going to be busier than ever. What's been the plus points, and what have been the disconnects from a supply chain perspective?
Yeah, I mean, to deal with, I guess, the broader business, the part of the business that's a primary food producer for retailers, I have to say, I mean, the huge effort that our division that grows the fruit has made to make sure that those trucks are still getting loaded. The rules around how do we keep people safe were a bit vague, and we're trying, doing everything we can to respect that, whilst recognizing that, people got to eat. So we've got to try and keep that part of the business running and correctly focused on that to begin with. But yeah, the real manifestations of this have been a supply chain, two things really, I guess. A supply chain conundrum. The demand has been fluctuating really fast. We sell, large structures, large capital items. Some want to accelerate what they get. Some want to book decisions off. You get a different decision one day, a different decision another day. It's reasonably complicated supply chain to move around. So that was the major change. I think the second piece was the very human piece of, we've suddenly got people who are not structured to work from home, working from home, and dealing with the very realities of what our staff have. They have families, children. I have children. And the IT had to be set up very quickly. How do we make sure that people's personal lives are accommodated and their welfare? How do we keep people's well-being in the right place? So the impact has been business, yes, of course, but I think, very, very human too. And I think the legacy of this a little will be, and I think for any business, ours and everyone else's, how we dealt with our people, ours and others, will be the primary thing that's remembered, and then what happened actually practically supply chain wise during it will have its place as well. But the main impact, so I guess that'd be the two, and I think the focus on how quickly can we adapt. How can we have a more flexible business? We hadn't seen this coming. When we sat down, did our strategic plans and our budgets last year, the need to be able to do the things that used to take us 3 or 4 months that now need to compress into weeks. The situation just demanded a positivity of practical outcome rather than it's no point getting up every morning and dealing with what's today's drama. I think it's got to be what's the opportunity we've got to try and be better with our staff tomorrow, better for our customers tomorrow. And how do we make that happen in half the time? And we've had a few scratchy head moments, that's for sure.
And you know what? That's a really good point. I spoke to an MD last Thursday, and he said exactly the same thing, reiterated, listen, sometimes when we've got to do things in 3 months and we've got to do it in 2.5 months, that presents an issue. What Corona's done is we've got to do something 3 months in 3 weeks. And he said there's going to be a change in the narrative. There's going to be a change in the language in my business from now on. And we're not going to use it as a carrot, or we're not going to use it as a stick. But we'll say, imagine if this was Corona, So anytime there's a challenge to getting operational timescales, you can listen. We did this because if we can get through this, we can get through Corona. If we can affect change in a really positive way, if we can manage all of the supply chain hiccups and make sure that domino trail keeps on going through Corona, wow, what's going to be, what isn't possible? But the other point you made was around making sure we look after people. I'm already seeing it now as a recruiter from a candidate perspective, people not being looked after in this furlough period, people not being and it's not about being looked after. There's only so much we can do for our staff in this time. It's how we communicate that. It's how we engage with them. And I think there's been some gaps there, but we'll talk about those a little bit more around. In fact, we'll talk about it now. I mean, in terms of the impact to the workforce, you talked around working from home. What did that present in terms of an IT? Did you have IT in-house, or was that an external provision? What did you have to do, hardware and support-wise?
No, we're very lucky. I remember one of the board members about 6 months ago or 12 months ago said, we're one of those companies where we're lucky the IT works, which is too often. How many times is that true? And it's we're blessed with a great team. But no, they adapted pretty quick, and we'd actually made coincidental decisions not connected to this, to have more mobile enabled staff, to have laptops, not desktops, to have cloud-based email systems and all the things that make us more flexible just as people. So we'd actually set ourselves up, if you like, unknowingly, for being able to move offshore, move out of the office reasonably quickly. So we, from I think the 16th of March was when we started that progress, and we had people walking out, through the car park with extra monitors and bits and pieces and laptops arrived that we didn't plan to buy. And yeah, I must say, by the following Tuesday, so the 24th, 25th March, sometime like that, we were fully functional and everything worked. We weren't expecting, or I wasn't expecting that to be the immediate outcome. So yeah, working from home was a transition. Almost the people more affected were those people who couldn't work from home but still had an essential job, and we're going into the workplace, and we're really trying to make that as easy an experience as possible. So not just the crew that left, but the crew that stayed behind. It's how we keep them safe, keep them connected. Yeah, and that was, I guess, really responsibly taken. I think the one thing that stands out is how kind of positive the team have been. It's a test of a great culture, isn't it? You can have a great plan for all these things, but if you don't have the right team spirit to go through these sort of exercises, you'll be found wanting pretty quick. So that was the main piece. Yeah, straight out, straight at home, and getting used to seeing people. Telling people, don't worry if your kids run across the back of a video call, don't worry about that.
Yeah, I know. Isn't it amazing? And again, that point you made about if you've got a great team, you can get through it. Yeah, how do you keep the guys aligned and motivated? And you alluded there, but what's the effect been on the culture? Because if you've got a great culture and you go through this, it's still going to be a test, and it's going to be great that you've got the great culture. But what's been the outcome of this new working environment, so to speak, Richard?
I think we've spoken to each other more. I would say as a business, we've probably seen an increase in general productivity in terms of quality of conversations and time spent, more interaction with customers, I think, for sure, than we would ordinarily have had, and different types of conversation. But in terms of motivation, I think it's letting people do their job, which sometimes can be quite difficult because you want to get involved, especially in a crisis. But I listened to a great, I was lucky enough to attend a presentation recently by a guy called Major Russ Lewis from he led a parachute regiment company in Afghanistan. He said, look, when it comes down to it, you've got to set your plan and you've got to assess what's happening around you. But after that, you've got to let your people do their job, and your role really operationally in a crisis then becomes, do you need to tweak that plan and make decisions? Don't sit on the fence. We can't wait for the perfect answer in a situation that's unfolding so quickly. And I really identified with that. And I think within the team, I think just constant, the over-communicate was the kind of brief we gave at the beginning. No problems are small problems. Just get them on the table and let's talk about them. And actually, I think in some ways, we've got some things a bit better working through that, which is kind of weird. I didn't expect that either. But then, many things have gone wrong during the process as well. But focus on the positives, because that's the sort of organisation we are and who I am. What have we taken well? We've let people have more remit to do their job under very different circumstances. And I think we'll carry that into the future.
I love that. And so I wear two hats. I wear an employee engagement hat and I wear a recruitment hat. From an employee engagement, some of the biggest issues around, people do exit interviews with people and they say, why are you leaving our business? People don't leave your business because they're getting paid 5 or 10K more from another business. Yeah. Leave because of reasons like they're not engaged because they don't feel they've got autonomy. And you just mentioning autonomy, they don't leave because they're not communicated. We find out about things afterwards. These are the two reasons why people lose this. These are the two reasons why attrition rates are high and why people don't create the employer brand they should do because of those two reasons. So it's really nice, unprompted, that you've noted those things, because in a crisis, that's when you've got to make sure you come to the forefront of that decision-making process around your staff, or else you lose them. Another point you made there was a really good one around making decisions. You know what it's like as leaders of organizations. sometimes we only make a decision when we're forced to, or a situation presents itself. I think one of the things that will come out of it, having a number of conversations with a number of C-suite business leaders, is that they will now, not on hunch, but they'll do their research. But where they would have sat on things for a while, they'll make the decisions. And if they, as you said, if they do make those decisions with the right levels of communication, empowering the people with the right level of autonomy, then, you know, that's got to be a plus. It's got to come from it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you got to, if you hire, we've two things I think that we lean on a lot. We've got quite a selective recruitment process, which I remember well when I joined. And you go through all of that. We put most people through exactly that kind of 4 or 5 interview process. It's a difficult experience, but we marry that up, or try to, with a very open, challenge-based culture. You know, we try to let people just say what's on their mind. The danger to that is you can have a lot of thought input, a lot of creative space, and that's got to be very deliberately managed with, when the time comes, get on it and make a decision. I think in a crisis, what you find is, yeah, inevitably the temptation for any manager, director, or whatever is to get involved in decisions that their teams are perfectly capable of making. And I think it's choosing kind of where you jump in to say, hey, I've got some value to add here. But really keeping people on, you know, watching them grow through the process as well. I think what their situation does present us with is an enormous development opportunity for anyone who is doing anything, because you have just taken every element that's in every business book you read and thrown it in 6 weeks and said, good luck with that. And, you know, do all of that. If that wasn't hard enough, you know, do that while you're trying to teach your kids, you know, fractions.
In half the time.
It's a really, I don't know, I think it's the level of empathy I have for, no, not just people, obviously any business, who you're trying to get through what is probably, whatever job you do, an extraordinary set of circumstances that you don't have the right policy for, whilst doing it with a backdrop of everyone's very, very human home situation. And that's not unique in the UK. We have that conversation with our office in Mexico. We talk about it in South Africa. We have the same conversation in China. You know, what you're trying to do, you're trying to do the best job every day and help your people grow. And here's an opportunity. Don't just focus on what's the core.
I love that. And to go back to the point you mentioned there around the world, and it's so funny. You know, there's a news correspondent and his kid runs through the video, and the nanny grabs. You know, before everyone was like, "Whoa, imagine if that happened to me at work." Quite frankly, if that ever happens in the future, then you know what? You're at home, you're working from home, you having your kid run through, or as you called it now, this might be a word, Zoom bombed. What's the best way to have an icebreaker at a very tense moment? You know, I
started this and I had one of these pictures behind me, and it was very corporate. And I thought, this is just not an authentic depiction of anyone I'm talking to or anyone that works in our team. And actually, you know, this is what working from home looks like. And do you know what? It doesn't matter. It's still the same quality of people. We're still trying to do the same quality job. So I don't think it dilutes it. If anything, I think you connect with, you know, the very real position that everyone is in. And I think, you know, I've heard lots of different people talk about different things, but these are, I won't use your word, so unusual, extraordinary. And they include seeing my wallpaper at home. Yeah.
I love your wallpaper. We talked about it just off before we logged on. I love it, and I'm just trying to. In a former life, I was a wine merchant, but that's another story. We can talk about that. We can talk about that offline. I'm trying to recognise a few of those wine labels. Going back to quarantine, 49 days. We can see on the screen there, 49th day of quarantine. Again, I didn't even realise. I was talking to the guys from Nifty Communications last week, and these are the guys that are championing the IsoNation initiative, and they said. It was 45 days. I was like, no, it's not 45 days. If anyone had asked me, I'd have said it was like 35 days because one day morphs into another. We don't ask how the weekend is anymore. There's no point. But in terms of lockdown, and obviously Boris, listen, everyone has two sides of your story. It's not a political agenda. And I think actually he's operating with action at the moment. There was a little bit of perceived ambiguity. I think what was said yesterday was, listen, what we want to do is we want to kind of kickstart the economy where it's safe to work, where you can't work from home physically, and you need to work in a different environment. Just make sure it's safe. And I think that's the bit I got. I don't know about you, but I got the message of, we're trying to ease things. We know where we'd like to be, but until we get the R down, we can't move with that. What do you think is going to be different for your business when lockdown finishes? What's going to be the big difference?
I mean, practically, ways of working will be a bit different. I think flexible working, trying to make people productive around their home circumstances. I don't see why that couldn't feature more heavily in the future. But more than anything, I hope innovation comes forward in most businesses. I hope the creativity of how people have got through this personally, professionally, I hope that's here to stay. Because we've, as you see, it's accelerated. We didn't think you could accelerate. It's amazing what you could do when you have to. So I think that's resilience. I think the situation's here for a long time. I don't think we'll be in any country in particular going back to anything that looked like, I don't know, pre-Christmas last year anytime soon. And I think to an extent we shouldn't, because it's not all bad. Some of it needs to come out of this and be acknowledged as, is it better that we've connected together as people and want to help each other out? I mean, that's one of the things we push as a company, is trying to really better connect how you make your money with what money you actually make. To what extent have you taken that people impact into the business? So I think a little bit of the scenario plays straight into one of the threads we have. So we try and thread a line between the quality of your earnings or your profits, if you like, with people and planet. Climate change is a big agenda, and we've seen huge leaps in climate change. What's happened in the last 6 weeks, you would never have seen under any other circumstance. How we've dealt with each other as people has changed, and I think companies that take out of this a sustained approach to those things are going to see a connection to what people buy on the shelves in supermarkets, car dealerships, whatever your business is. I think it will be more important that you'll be measured in different ways by different people, and this process has rapidly accelerated that.
100%. You couldn't, and we'll touch upon a couple of those when we talk about the one moment the one good thing you think is going to come out of it. We talked about it a little bit with Neil on my chat on the second or third one. We talked about buying local. We think that's going to change because everyone's just changing their habits a little bit. I think you talked about it off air. We talked about galvanizing communities and people being more helpful. On the Thursday nights when we're doing our claps, I didn't know my neighbours 2 doors down. I've been there for 5 years, and now we stay out with a glass of wine and our outside the houses, talking across hedges and fences and walls, just kind of communicating. We had a dinner in each other's gardens. They were in their garden. I never spoke to our neighbours before. They're great, interesting, great people, rather than just saying hello. So there are some great to come out of it. Have you seen the worldwide footage of major cities and the animals roaming around?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, isn't it?
Wow, it's amazing. They're saying bees. I've never seen more bees in my garden. So it has been a reset. There's been a reset. There's an environmental reset. There's a reset around business operations. There's a reset around business communicating. There's a reset around business empathy. And we talked a little bit with when I spoke with Henry from TSG. We talked about there being a little bit around SLAs. There'd been a little bit more leniency around those business relationships, because before, if you didn't hit stuff at a certain time, no one wants to care about your operational issues or the fact that you might have a technical down. You said you get this here. Now things have moved. There's a bit more empathy. Obviously, everybody still needs to be commercial. Everybody still has an element of being part of someone else's supply chain. But I think that human element is going to be absolutely massive. In terms of your industry, what do you think? What good will come from? We'll talk about the one good thing later, but from an industry perspective, what do you think is going to be one of the plus points that comes out of the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think one of the things I hope is that people have not in the UK. It's going to be the same most places. I think if people have a better appreciation of where their food comes from, I think how that food gets there. And I think if that were to be a bit more domestic in every market, you will get a climate benefit from not transporting food around quite so much. It'll address some of our migration concerns that I think every country has in its own way. So I think instead of we've been used to cheap food for a long time. rather than being so worried about, you know, how is it produced, where is it produced, where does it come from? And I think this presents a little reset around that. How many people do you know who have had to walk away from a major or a standardized retail outlet that they've usually had for practical reasons, because you can't get in, or you don't want to go in, or you can't get a delivery slot, whatever, and you've bought, you know, your veg from your local store or your meat from your local butcher. Now, how much of that's sustained, I don't know. But I think one thing for the industry that will come out better is there'll be a general acknowledgement of, you know, there are more options how you can feed yourself. And one of the considerations should be, you know, where and how is that food been produced? So professionally, I would say that's probably the biggest observation.
I think that's a brilliant one. I think, listen, we're in this mindset, aren't we? Where we work so much, you know, we need just convenience. We buy stuff because of convenience, and there's nothing wrong with buying stuff because of convenience. But actually, what you're seeing on a lot of the social media, what I'm seeing on my social media, people are cooking a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, well, and expanding, yeah.
Isn't it? But I've never seen a revolution like this, where the people who you see on Facebook who've been normally running around and been really busy because they haven't got the 2-hour commute or the 3-hour commute. You know, I worked out the other day. I haven't used an iron for 6 weeks because I
I mean, other than the
we bought so much time. We've got a little bit more time to do some really cool stuff. And I think, you know, someone put something on Facebook the other day about where they can get some rosemary from, some fresh rosemary from. I thought no one would ever put that on Facebook. And that's so when you rewind that to what we're cooking, why are we cooking this meal, what we're using, why we're using these ingredients, where are they from? Is there an alternative? I think there's going to be, I think there's certainly be a shift. And in terms of your industry, you know, listen, we need mass-produced food. We also need to know where the food comes from. And I think if you've got the balance, like everything, and you've got the choice, sometimes it's great to go to the supermarket. Sometimes it's great and go to fruit and veg and the fishmonger or the butcher. But having that choice and being able to mix it up, I think that's the one thing that will resonate. And I genuinely think that's the one thing that will stay beyond business. And in general, if you were to, I always wind up the interviews by saying, before I ask that question, I must say, I've been told, listen, we need to make sure we like and share this interview, please, guys. So anyone that's watching it, please don't forget to like or share it with any of the business groups you've got. It'll be on, it's on Facebook. It'll be on other platforms as well. We need to really grow this community. And I think the feedback we get is, Nick, we don't mind hearing you chat, but we really like the insightful conversations you've got with some really influential and recognized business leaders. So again, thank you for today. And thank you for the guys that have posted bits and pieces. Someone has said, is that Zoom bombing a word, or have you created that?
It's just come off the top of my head while I was.
Oh, you know, well, we might have someone in, or we might have someone in the IsoNation legal team that might be able to help you with that from a trademark perspective, because I like that. Zoom bombed it work.
It's all yours.
All right, you heard that, guys. So listen, we always wrap up the conversation with the one good thing that's going to come out of this. I never like to make this too spiritual. I'm quite a mindful person, and I like to see the gift in every situation, good or bad, and there's a reason for everything that happens. And what's the one good thing you think will come out of the situation that we've been in over the last couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, it would be unfair not to backdrop of that without acknowledging the many challenging things that I think people are going through.
Indeed.
I don't think they need restating. They're on our news every day, aren't they? But if I was to focus on, I'll pick two if I can take a liberty, Nick. One is 6 months ago, would you have got the person from 7 doors down grocery because, you know, they can't get out or they're scared to go to the shop? Would you have really taken that, ring on the bell and say, sure, I'll go to Tesco's for you, no problem? And whereas that's become quite normal. And I think if we can keep in touch with that, just a fraction of that, I think we'll be a better country and better people for it. The second, you know, if you ask my kids who haven't Zoom bombed me today, I've not travelled for 6 weeks. I've been at the family, you know, dinner every night, and I'm very much reminded, not only, you know, not particularly of mine, but of the sacrifices I think everyone makes to just make companies' wheels go round. And I think if a little bit connected in our own homes, for those who have found this an enjoyable experience at home, that is, take that from it. You know, my wife and kids will certainly look back on this as a time that I was around a bit more. And, you know, I think that's something that will play out my mind when I'm choosing what trips to go on in the future.
I think that's beautiful. And you know what? I think that's beautiful because my daughter said to me, Daddy, how come you're not in the office as much? I still come to the office. I come to the office for these interviews because I'm only 2 minutes from my house, and I will definitely get Zoom bombed by them. But actually, they've recognised it. They've forgotten what day it is every day now, obviously, like everyone else has. But they've recognised that Daddy's home more and Mummy's home more. And actually, if there's one thing we can take away from this, I think that's a really poignant moment. And also, actually, your business will allow a bit of flexibility.
I think I come from that generation where, you know, I was very lucky. I grew up in a house where you're looked after, right? And there's parents around. The world wasn't as easily accessible as it is now. And I think we've got quite used to being able to jump on the train, disappear overnight, jump on a plane, whatever that might be. And I think, you know, this has brought some neighbourly values back to us as a society, which I think can only be a good thing. And I think it's reintroduced eating around the table, because you can't get a takeout, you can't go to the restaurant. Things that we'll get back in due course, and we should get back. But on the flip side, you know, I would encourage everyone who's obviously recognising all the hardship, but they're going to come out of this more resilient and having had an experience that I hope will be once in a generation. But I don't think that needs to mean that it's all negative.
I love that. I love that. It's a really lovely way to round it off, but I'm going to round it off and embarrass you a little bit. Denise Mills, I'm assuming that's your mum. So a big shout out to those guys. Leanne Davis, big shout out. Gemma. Listen, Richard, it's been, when you said you would agree to the interview, we only have one slot a week, and we know how busy you are. We know, even though you're not jet setting around, you're still running an international business. To give us the time, and equally so to give us the insight for today, it's a great honour, a great pleasure to have you on. So thank you. Big thank you from IsoNation to Richard Mills. Thank you, buddy. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks. Pleasure.